Welcome to this week's news program. I'm your host, Diana Longree. Thank you for tuning in. To help me with this week's newscast is Mr. Kevin Berglund, my co-anchor. Thank you, Mr. Berglund, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Now, today we are going to focus on one topic only, and that is the recycling contract for Maplewood, Minnesota. Now, this may not sound like a big topic that should take up a whole hour's worth of discussion and clip and analysis. However, in Maplewood, this can be a big issue, especially when they are looking to change a significant policy, whether or not the city should own the carts or let the recycler supply the carts. Now, that doesn't sound like it should be a big issue, but the council spent an enormous amount of time fiddling and fumbling around trying to decide what to do, and in the end, they tabled it. But we are going to get started on this topic. We have covered much of this topic in the past and previous years, haven't we, Mr. Berglund?
Ms. Juenemann, one of the city council members, and to beat a dead horse, loves to do stuff in private, and this is her big issue that she carries a lot of baggage with when she comes to Maplewood. So anytime anything simple that comes up about rubbish collection, garbage collection, or recycling, there's a big flare-up.
The first few clips are going to be about the details of the new contract. Nothing too much out of the ordinary, but still it's important to know and to understand how that contract will be the same or different.
On 17th, the City of Maplewood received 6 proposals from our request for proposals for trash and recycling. On July 22nd, the City Council authorized staff to negotiate with the top-ranked respondents. And Tennis Sanitation had the best overall scores in the recycling-only alternate category when evaluated against all 6 criteria, including the lowest price. So the City Council authorized us to begin those negotiations with Tennis Sanitation for a new recycling contract. So the details on the contract are a 5.5-year contract beginning January 2020 to June 2025. The cart size options would remain the same, 35, 65, or 95-gallon recycling carts. When we rolled out carts years ago, we rolled out just the 65-gallon carts, but since then, Tennis has been offering our residents to change those cart sizes either to a 35 or 95 or remain with that 65.
Tennis Sanitation, as you could surmise from that clip, was the provider of the recycling services to Maplewood in the past contract. And as you heard, Maplewood initially only started with the 1 cart size, but it was actually the hauler, Tennis, that said, let's give you the choice of a couple of other sizes besides just 65, which apparently worked out well and is now incorporated in that new contract. I think this is a good positive change because not everybody has the same amount of recycling.
And again, you're absolutely right, because even though it's a cart, and Tennis pushed the city of Maplewood to using a cart, because before they were using bins, a cart can still be a real burden to lug around, push around, and to store. And some people don't need the grand size. There are other factors involved. So I think because Tennis is a local business serving local customers, he knows the customers who he deals
that
with.
When the city council gave the authorization to staff to look at these RFPs and to start those negotiations, the city of Maplewood actually formed a small little working group that was closed to the public. And that consisted of 2 city council members and a number of staff people on that little committee. The 2 city council members who were on that committee was, of course, Kathleen Juenemann. We all figured that was going to be one of the appointees to this little subcommittee, considering that that is her big bag, the trash bag, and the newly appointed William Knutson. Previously, Maplewood had a committee like that with the past negotiations with contract, and those meetings were actually open to the public. And that's when John Nephew, a council member, was on that committee, and he actually wanted to have those meetings open to the public. Now, many years in the future, Kathleen Juenemann is on there, and she wants them closed.
Councilmember Kathleen Juenemann does not think very positively about transparency. When John Nephew was a member of the council, he actually believed in what he said. Kathleen Juenemann, Kathy Juenemann, as she is commonly called, would like to see everything in the back room. And of course, she was in the back room and there were no cameras. Of course, when John Nephew was there, when they did this, I think 6 years ago, everything was open to the public. It was on cable TV. Now nothing. It's not open to the public. It's not on TV. There's no minutes. So who in the world knows what happened in the back? But we know, everybody who knows Kathy Juenemann knows she rants and raves and she's hilarious, and all the city administrators, in order to stay on her good side, laughs at the craziness that goes on and humors her. So you can only imagine what a circus is. Now, of course, if it would have been on camera, if it would have been in the public, it would have been a totally different outcome, because there would have probably not been the disparaging comments, the disparaging jokes that Kathleen Juenemann flies and flings around at not only members of the public, but at small businesses in Maplewood.
And of course, I should mention that you actually know this from firsthand experience. So you're not just making this up.
No.
You know this from firsthand experience, because years and years ago, you were actually at one of those backroom meetings when Kathleen Juenemann was busy talking and disparaging the then sheriff of Ramsey County at that time, who happened to be Sheriff Fletcher, and that she was doing all of that back then in those meetings having to do with Sheriff Fletcher and the whole dispatch issue.
And open meetings and cameras, what they do is they civilize elected officials like Kathy Juenemann. They require them to be polite and more normal. So when you're in the back room, a council member like Kathy Juenemann is in the back room, she believes that by disparaging others who don't even know what's going on and flinging comments on them and creating a culture that has been harmful to so many in Maplewood, she gets a big chuckle out of it, a big laugh out of it.
And I believe that she thinks that it gives her credibility by being able to do that. That's somehow how she builds her base and her credibility.
Right.
But let's continue with our film footage of the details of the contract.
There is a change also to large apartments. We will be allowing them to utilize recycling dumpsters that would be purchased by tennis for use in those large apartment complexes. So that's a new change. The collection will remain weekly on one of the city's 5-day certain collection routes. The billing will continue as we currently do it, with Tennis Sanitation billing the city for the overall recycling, and then the city adding that recycling fee onto the residents' water bill. They will continue to collect recycling at city facilities at no charge as part of this contract.
Two important things from that slide. One, that the apartment complexes now, rather than having several regular size bins that are used at single family residential households, will have a much larger bin for recycling. That makes entire sense. And you heard how Tennis is actually purchasing those larger bins for those complexes to encourage that type of recycling, and also to provide larger accommodations for recycling at those residents. The other thing that I want to make mention of is that she talks about the billing. She says that Tennis bills the city for the stops and the pickups that are done for recycling in the city. And then the city bills that out on the water bills. In a way she says it, she's implying that Maplewood is just a pass-through entity, that whatever Tennis is charging the city then goes and just rebills it to the residents who are having the recycling done. That's not entirely true, because what Maplewood charges its residents, and we've covered this on a previous newscast, is what the Maplewood charges the residents is over 80 cents more than what Tennis, who's doing all the work, is charging the city. So the city is actually making money on every single recycling contract with each pickup that there is.
And it's kind of interesting, the city has its hands in everybody's recycling cart essentially, and putting a fee on that, despite not touching the cart, not touching the recycling material, not involved in the billing. They are just a guy in the middle that's getting their hands greased a little bit,
right,
to build up another fund on another fee or a tax.
Right, and keep in mind, Maplewood doesn't do their water billing either. Actually, St. Paul Regional Water Department, who supplies the majority of all of Maplewood's water, is the one who does the water billing. And for those few residents in Maplewood who get their water from North St. Paul, North St. Paul does the billing for that water. And by the way, for that electricity, those same households also get electricity from North St. Paul. So you see, Maplewood does no billing for any of those utilities directly.
And of course, I'm sure whenever Maplewood slaps on a fee or a tax, they have another fund which they borrow against to move money around. And of course, like you said, they had all kinds of meetings with two of the council members there in the back room. They should have all been on TV. There is really no discussions on what priorities, what rankings, what criteria, whatever they did to come to this final decision. They just, boom, this is our decision. And who knows what in the world occurred.
Right. And later on in future clips that we have in our show, hopefully we'll get to those, that they talk about other funds that are underfunded. And is there a way that they can move money from the recycling fund into those funds to bring them up to where they should be? Imagine that. But we'll have to wait until we get to those clips so you can hear the answer to that question. But now let's continue with our film footage of the contract terms.
Encourage, along with the city, small businesses and churches to opt into the city's recycling program. One change there is that they'll also offer dumpsters for small businesses and churches at a fee of $45 per month. And those recycling carts that they roll out for the small businesses and churches, it's 2 95-gallon carts at the same cost as our residential household fee. So it's a really good deal. The reports will continue to come to the city monthly and annually, and of course, those detail all the program specifics like number of households served and so forth. We'll continue to have the work plan where the Environmental Commission and City Council will review that, and we'll look for efficiencies in our program, and Tennis will help us implement those over each year. Public education will remain the same. We'll work with Tennis and our trash hauler to do a combined annual flyer, and then Tennis does roll out those education tags when they find materials that are not recyclable at residential households.
Once again, we hear all of the tasks that tennis sanitation is doing as part of this contract. And we know that, as we indicated, tennis then charges the city of Maplewood under that contract. Maplewood then takes what that fee is that they've been charged by tennis, they add money to it, a fee to it, and that's what they bill the resident. And it doesn't sound like there's much, as Mr. Berglund indicated, that the city is contributing to this whole process.
One thing we do know about the city from past meetings, which we've talked about on this show, and they're not talking about it here, but the city really does not want to go, especially Kathy Juenemann does not want to go with the local business. They want to go with a big multinational, international. They do not want to go essentially with tennis or any other company that is a local company. So the big question is, and this is a question they never ask and they never answer, is why did we go with the local guy when our whole process, our whole system was set up to knock out the local guy? So you can only be assured that tennis had to have an incredible deal, an incredible hands-down deal over the big multinationals called Waste Management or Allied Waste. And I don't actually ever recall them describing what kind of other RFPs, requests for proposals, came in, whether they came in from Waste Management or Allied Waste. But you know, for the city of Maplewood to put their cards down on the table and say, tennis is a one, that he had to outbid them or had to have such an incredible deal that they couldn't refuse it. But they're not happy about it.
At least some of them aren't happy about it, that's for sure. Let's continue.
Damages, we did modify that compared to the last contract. We have some new liquidated damages and then an incident escalation procedure to make it more clear what the process is, if there is a concern. One of those new liquidated damages is mixed public messaging, so that the two contractors are working closely with the city to ensure that we're giving adequate messaging for delayed service and so forth.
I would like to see in more detail exactly what that liquidated damages clause is, because she's talking about mixed messages. Now, is this a penalty to the trash hauler, the recycling hauler, for having a message different than the city? Or what if the trash hauler has the appropriate message, but it's really the city that has the wrong message? I mean, I would like to understand exactly what these liquidated damages are and who is the beneficiary of these liquidated damages. Who is harmed by the mixed message? And then does that mean that if those liquidated damages, which means money, cash, let's say that cash is paid out under liquidated damages, what happens to that money? Because ultimately, isn't it the consumer that has had the damages done to them? And so do they get a rebate or a refund of their services as a result of these liquidated damages being paid? Or does the city just put it into their coffers and say, well, it was a good day at City Hall?
Tennis did supply us with an alternate proposal. As you know, tennis sanitation does have the carts currently rolled out in the city of Maplewood. The RFP outlined that the city would own the carts, so we were looking for pricing for city-owned carts. However, tennis was the only one that had supplied us with this alternate because, of course, they currently have the carts out there. So on the rates here, there are no taxes or fees, so this is the fee that would be charged to the city. So you can see for each of the years, the contractor-supplied carts starts at that $4 per household per month, up to $5.25 per household per month at the end of the contract. And then if the city were to purchase the carts, tennis is actually proposing an increase in price. So that pricing would be $4.40 to $4.50. And again, that 10-cent difference comes from if the city purchases the carts from Tennis's preferred cart manufacturer.
Now, this may seem counterintuitive to say, well, if the city provides the carts, then it will actually cost more. But if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Because first of all, Tennis Sanitation is a fairly large operation locally here, and they serve many different communities, but the carts are all the same. They all say Tennis on them. They're all the same color. Tennis owns those carts. They maintain those carts. They store those carts. So whether or not, if it is a recycler location in Maplewood or a recycler location like say in St. Paul, it may not make any difference because they all say Tennis on them. However, once Maplewood owns those carts, now more than likely they have to be a separate color. They have to have the word Maplewood with a maple leaf on them. They have to be stored separately and differently from all the other Tennis carts. They can't just be stored in with all the other ones because they'll be all mixed up. And so when they need to go and find a specific Maplewood cart, they don't want to have to be digging through the whole warehouse to try to find one black cart for somebody in Maplewood. So more than likely they'll have to have a separate segregated storage area just for those extra carts so that way they can maintain them, because they do of course get damaged or they just get lost. And so there's reasons why you have to have extra carts. And so that I think is part of that cost benefit analysis that Tennis must have done when they did this cost breakdown for the city of Maplewood. So let's continue with our film footage.
Reasoning behind the increase in price based on Tennis's comments was that with the management of the carts, they feel that they'd have to hire a new employee to do that, thus the increase in pricing to the city of Maplewood.
Can I ask a question about that? I have a couple of questions about that. If it's my understanding from reading through all these materials, if Tennis supplies the carts, it's one size. That's what they're looking at, is just one size. But if the city supplies the carts, we were looking at 3 different sizes. That's my first question.
Madam Mayor,
Why is that?
actually, either scenario would be 3 different sizes.
Okay, because that wasn't clear to me in the materials. It looked like it was like Tennis was only doing one size cart.
Now, you saw the clip, a number of clips before this, where it talked about that whole issue about the 1 cart size versus the 3 cart size, and it was very clear to you, having watched it the first time, that you could see that that's what they were talking about, that it was actually Tennis that was supplying 3 different cart sizes. It was clear to the 2 of us reporters here it was 2 different sizes, and yet here we have the appointed mayor, Marley Abrams, a skilled litigator of around 30 years or more, confused by how many carts, sizes, Tennis is supplying. Now, she either didn't read her materials very clearly, or she wasn't listening to the presentation that just happened minutes before she asked her question.
And the way
Amazing.
The way she asked the question, it was like a gotcha question. I gotcha, Tennis. Now, I'm thinking, even if you're not reading the material, even if you're not listening to what's going on, because you're formulating your gotcha question, you would think she would, being up there at City Hall for how many years now? 6 years almost? That she would realize, and being a resident, she would realize that Tennis already has different size cart. It's odd that Maplewood seems to want to buy their own carts and have another department, a recycling cart department, when the current contractor, Tennis, would would have to go and pull all those carts, and then they'd have to all redistributed all Maplewood carts. Doesn't that, is there, what is it, where in the equation is the efficiency cofactor?
Well, I don't think the efficiency cofactor is part of their equation up there at City Hall. Let's continue as Marley asks another question.
I looked at the numbers a lot of different ways. And I talked with Mr. Thompson today. I talked with City Manager Coleman today. Why is it that it is an advantage to us to own the carts because we're charging our residents more for us to own the cart? I mean, I get it that our name would be on it, that the city of Maplewood would be on it. I mean, I don't know why that branding is all that important. We own the carts, but I guess I have some questions about that. And either Ms. Finwall, and maybe I'll call on our two council members that sat on the committee working through the RFP, so that I can understand that better, because I just don't see the advantages, that we're charging our residents more. I don't understand it.
Appointed Mayor Marley Abrams protests too much. At least twice she indicated how she didn't understand, that she's questioning this, and yet we have reported on these newscasts when they first had the workshop and they were talking about the city switching over to owning the carts. She didn't ask any of those questions and actually appeared in support of the city owning the carts. Now, when we look at our next clip, Sean Finwall of Maplewood administration is going to answer the question as to why it's important for the city of Maplewood to own their own carts.
Do you want to try it first?
Yes, I will. The main reason the city of Maplewood wrote in the RFP that we would supply the carts is so, number one, we would get better contract pricing. So that did happen, with the other proposals. I'm sure they gave us their best pricing based on the fact that they didn't have to roll out the carts. But in the current scenario with tennis already having the carts in place, that was something we weren't expecting. So what this means for residents in the future, if the city of Maplewood did buy the carts, and I do have a list of benefits, including the Ramsey County grant, which would cover half the cost of the carts. But what it would mean to residents is really for future contracts. We would be securing better pricing there, I think, is number one reasoning.
Mr. Berglund, earlier you had indicated that it was your observation from looking at other past discussions at other past council meetings that there is a certain segment up at Maplewood City Hall that would like to give the boot to tennis sanitation. When we listened to Ms. Finwall give her explanation is we put it in the RFP that the city would require, that the city would supply the carts so that we could get better prices on the contract for the pickup. To me, that almost sounds like they thought that if they could give the other companies a leg up by saying, don't worry about how many carts are needed to supply, just give us your best price for pickup, that may indeed have given tennis the boot. Right. Because the city was all poised from that past workshop that we reported on before, all poised to go forward with purchasing their own city carts. And that was the direction of the council at that time. And so what tennis did is that they said, well, here's our price if you've got city carts. Here's the price if we supply the carts and you don't. And still their price supplying the carts was lower than the price of the other companies, which would only be doing pickup and not supplying any carts. So you're right on when you say that Tennis gave them a deal that they couldn't refuse. So now they're all trying to figure out how they're going to pacify their buddies at Ramsey County to use that grant and get on the municipality owns the carts agenda.
And because all their meetings were in secret, and I think they had Ramsey County officials that weighed in on this. We had consultants hired, I think, by Ramsey County who weighed in on this. We had the experts in the recycling industry, in other words, the city administrators, including this woman, Sean Finwald of Maplewood, who weighed in on this. They had obviously had some sort of scheme to do something, and it sounds like it was to knock out Tennis, the local guy, and go with the big multinational, and it was foiled. And so despite all these bright minds and all these professional government administrators from Maplewood and North St. Paul, the local guy who knows his industry, actually, who cares about residents, actually gave them the deal that would help residents. And they seemed shocked and awe that he was not most interested in taking care of the administrators in Ramsey County and Maplewood instead of taking care of his actual clients, constituents,
Right.
the ones he deals with, the ones he answers calls from.
Right. So the majority then of the discussion from here on out is all about the seesaw back and forth on the council and with administrators, whether or not if it's the city manager or it's Sean Finwald, about seesawing back and forth, talking about this whole issue about city-owned carts versus not city-owned carts. Because you see, previously, the city council and the city administrators made a commitment that they were going to be buying the carts, that they were going to be using that Ramsey County grant, and they probably committed to the Ramsey County commissioners or to their county manager that they were going to get on the program, and as a municipality, Maplewood would be owning their own recycled carts. Well, now, since the price that they've got that is the best price is actually without being on the cart program, and that the recycler will provide the carts, now they have to figure out how can they weave back and forth to justify going to the higher price so that they can be on the city buys the carts process. You see? And so you're going to see some of the council members pretending like, oh, that, yeah, you know, we got to do a cost-benefit analysis, and oh, maybe we should not think about, we shouldn't be supplying the carts unless it makes sense, or when does that happen, and doing all this hee-hawing around, and it's all just part of the dance, trying to backtrack to where they were back months ago at the workshop when they decided they were buying the carts for the city.
And all this hee-hawing up might well be, it's all the money that the county and the city has dumped into all their endless meetings, because these are all administrators taking months of time, having many, many hours of meetings full of people making $50 an hour, sitting around talking about this. And of course, the question is, why aren't all these people, in other words, the city administrators, the city council members, Ramsey County administrators, grateful? Thank you. You have saved us a lot of effort. We do not have to be responsible for all this. You've actually come through to give our residents a great deal. And instead of speaking gratitude, they push out vibes of hostility to Tennis and the work they went through. It seems perplexing of why they are all emoting and so emotionally tied up in this cart thing. There are so many other things they should actually put their energies and their emotions in Ramsey County, in Maplewood, than to dig a hole for of ingratitude for somebody who they should be expressing abundant gratitude, because now we get to work on real issues.
Right.
Because we're professionals, aren't we? We want to work on real issues and not toy issues.
Yes, in other words, they should be happy that Tennis has all the carts that he needs to supply all of Maplewood, that he will maintain them all, that they're all his, and that Maplewood doesn't even have to worry about one cart at all.
In fact,
Be happy.
Maplewood can probably lower property taxes, or Ramsey County can lower property, or maybe they can use their money for another scheme.
No, don't even go down that road. We know that that's a bunch of hogwash too. That'll never happen. Never happen. And this year, definitely never going to happen, because they already passed the maximum tax levy. So, but Sean Finwall, of course, has this feeling. You saw how uneasy she was to give her answer, right? You could see that in her face when she was giving her answer. So now, because she's feeling that she needs reinforcements in her answer, because she's not really confident in it, she's going to lob the ball over to Kathleen Juenemann, who was on that committee, and see if maybe Kathleen Juenemann can get her out of the hole.
Member Juenemann and Knutson might.
Okay, Councilmember Juenemann, I'm going to ask you about the carts. I'm just not convinced that we need to be in the business of owning our carts.
Well, we own our trash carts.
I understand that, but that's a different issue.
Well, yes and no. That was kind of what led us to this, okay? And that where we are now with Tennis is where we could be with somebody else. And I know, sorry, Willie, but I know that this pricing is done because he wants to keep his carts out there with his name on them. I don't have to be a genius to figure that out. But should something happen to Willie or his business blows up, hopefully not, we need to go with another vendor, then we still have to do the cart reversal. And we have the county grant to help us with half that price now. Look at what the county's doing. You're going to tell me in 5 years the county's been giving out grants? They're closing golf courses, in case nobody's noticed. They're buying sports domes, but they're closing golf courses. Ooh, zing. But I don't think these grants are going to be around. It's just that simple, because they're starting to squeeze on everything. And we got in on the ground floor of being offered this grant. They aren't offering it to everyone. And that's part of the impetus for doing it now. They will pay for half of them, and then we will own them. And no matter who the vendor is for the next 25, 35, 45 years, the carts will be there, and nobody has to do the great exchange, blah, blah, blah. That's why. I think there's an interesting fact that might have come up on the internet today with a neighboring city that's also done with tennis. Ms. Finwall, could you inform us about that?
You have appointed Mayor Marley Abrams pretending she's the judge. I'm not convinced. Miss Juenemann, give me your best argument. Miss Juenemann gives her best argument. Well, you know, the county's got this grant. There's no guarantee it'll be available. And like any good salesman, we get in on the ground floor. You heard that statement. We're getting in on the ground floor. You know, you're always concerned about it when somebody who's got a pyramid scheme to sell you says you're getting in on the ground floor. Well, it's the same. So here you've got Kathleen Juenemann giving her best sales pitch, and then she says, oh, but then something's happened, and I read it on the internet, as if she actually reads anything on the internet, considering she always had city staff print off all her emails because she didn't have a computer and refused to use her email availability. So anyway, so there you go. She's saying, oh, something's happened on the internet, and then lobs the ball back over to Sean Finwall for her to give and finish up the close on the sales pitch. So let's find out what that is.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and Councilmember Juenemann. So you're referring to the new contract with North St. Paul. So the city of North St. Paul now contracts with Tennis Sanitation, and they applied for a Ramsey County grant to cover, you know, half the cost of their carts. So they recently purchased recycling carts that Tennis will be managing.
Okay. Very interesting.
But we have no idea what North St. Paul's requirements for their carts are. If they're agreeable to simply have them be the same color as the tennis carts without the tennis logo. We don't know anything about the logo. Maybe North St. Paul isn't requiring that they have a snowman on them. We have no idea. We don't know the details, and apparently Sean Finwell doesn't have any of the details either, because she would have shared them if she could have. Now, in all of that, now Kathleen Juenemann comes back because she wanted more of an answer than what was given.
Our bid was given and our interviews were cast. That wasn't in the works. Again, I say, very interesting. I personally, I know that Tennis Sanitation has done a great job on our recycling program. I have no argument with that whatsoever. But I will give the same, basically, opinion I gave 7 years ago to my then colleagues. If people think we're not paying for Willie's carts, try again. We are. It's just buried in the cost. And so he not wanting to manage our carts and wanting his advertising out there gave us a higher price for us buying our own carts. That's what this boils down to. And I'm willing to play chicken with Willie, so there you go.
That helps me to understand this a little bit more.
And-
Councilmember
And I am concerned that the county grant will go away and that should down the road, as she said, forever, we would have to buy them ourselves completely. So that's part of my motivation at this point.
The cost of the service with tennis, using tennis carts, indirectly does include the cost of his carts, obviously. But she's overlooking the fact that if his service is the service alone and the city buys the carts still ultimately are, the cost is moved on to the consumer, and it still costs the residents money. You see, it's a circular argument that she poses. And they also do not say what was the contract rates that North St. Paul received. What if the rates that Maplewood received were better than the rates that North St. Paul negotiated and were still better ahead without city-owned carts and with tennis-owned carts? And you heard how she's willing to use the power of government to play chicken with the guy and the company that actually won the RFP. She's going to play chicken with the one that won the RFP.
And why is she calling, who is this Willie? I want to play chicken with Willie. I mean, Willie, she's obviously wants some flesh and blood of this guy, Willie. I mean, you can just see the way she's disparaging.
Well, he's the
him.
owner of tennis.
Okay.
Like as if she knows him personally and they're going to sit down at the bar and do arm wrestling.
Right.
We're going to play chicken out in the back room someplace.
Or they're going to play Russian roulette.
Yeah.
You know, one of us is going to be sacrificed.
Yeah, that's, yes. So, I mean, if you're driving and you're playing chicken in a car, somebody might end up dead, that's for sure. Well, let's continue as this discussion moves, well, as it's going.
background on buying the carts.
It, to me, seems counterintuitive. I'm wondering where does the benefit of $234,000 go? You know, if we are charged more to manage the carts, because if you look at the proposal from Tennis, it's more money, but they say ultimately it's for an employee to manage our cart system.
Then how can
So
we
it-
move that to North St. Paul? I'm kind of intrigued.
Let's not have
You're-
crosstalk, let's just.
You're talking about stuff I don't know about, so.
Right, so let's just, excuse me, can we
let's-
just focus on this and not have crosstalk? Councilmember Knutson, do you want to
Well,
finish your comments?
Now, this is an interesting exchange. Kathy Juenemann wanted to jump in and blow Mr. Bill Knutson's comments out of the water. Remember, he's newly appointed to the council. he owes his allegiance to appointed Mayor Marley Abrams
Absolutely.
because that's his buddy. That's why he got appointed, because they're buddies. Okay, so he's coming up and saying, well, he doesn't see how it is of any benefit to go with the higher level in the contract, which would mean the city owns the carts, when they could have a lower contract and the recycler owns the carts. So he's actually falling on the side of let the recycler supply the carts. The city doesn't have to be in the cart business. Kathy Juenemann wants to interrupt. He tells her, you're talking about North St. Paul and something I don't know anything about. And of course, Marley Abrams jumps in to tell Kathleen Juenemann, shut up.
Right, and of course, what is perplexing about William Knutson, the buddy of Mary Abrams, he was on this secret committee. He could have insisted that these be open to the public. These could have been on camera. And the way you look at him, you sat in all these meetings, you had all this information, you had all this RFP, you had all this discussion. Why are you presenting it as a deer in the headlights look that you're flying blind right now? Weren't you there, or did you come to these meetings? He knew what was going on before we had this little show here this evening. And the question is, what is this about?
Right.
And it's clear that, everybody who knows Kathy Juenemann knows that she's a drama queen and she's a bully. And if she doesn't get what she wants, she rants and raves and she berates whoever it is who stands in her way. But isn't this all familiar to William Knutson?
And you're right. When he first starts to speak, it sounds like and appears like the first he heard of this recommendation is in his council packet, right there before the meeting, and was not part of any meetings in this committee meeting he supposedly was asked at. That's why he's being asked to give his input, because apparently he was supposed to have been there, but we don't really know if he ever did show up.
And
we don't know.
He's had his input apparently all the way along. Did they vote at this secret committee, or was there a vote of the city staff and Kathy Juenemann, or was it just Kathy Juenemann and she said it and everybody, the staff agreed with her and he didn't show up? It seems odd that he's the one person, the one party who hasn't had any input at all are the residents of Maplewood. The ones they had absolutely zero input, zero knowledge, zero input.
Yes. Well, let's continue with our next clip.
Frankly, throughout the process, this one was a little confusing. I can see a return on investment. I can see a lower price for owning your own equipment, but I don't see it here. So I don't see the lower cost to the community, and it's a 20-year thing. I think for $234,000 or whatever it's going to cost us in this thing, we might find a better use for our money on a cash basis. I would look to our finance people to say what are we going to where does the money come from? Where does it save us? Do we want to amortize this over 10 or 15 years for the purpose of saving something in the future? So this needs some thought.
I would agree with you, and that was my dilemma in trying to understand this.
Yep, that's appointed Mayor Marley Abrams saying, yeah, that was her dilemma in trying to understand this, because you see the paradigm was changed on them once they got that RFP from Tennis, giving the two different tiers that they could choose from. Service only, and he provides the carts, or service and the city owns the carts.
One thing I think you can see is Kathleen Juenemann has really gotten William Knutson's goat. The way he's slipping his head around there, that does not seem to be his normal, I'm just with you all kind of reaction.
Well, next we'll be listening to the comments from Brian Smith.
Do you want to weigh in on this?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I share your concern, and when we spoke about this, was it 2 meetings ago? I asked the same question, and also did not feel like I was. It made a lot of sense to me either. I think the only compelling thing I've heard at all is Councilmember Juenemann's point about the grant, and that, if we can essentially get them at 50% now, does that make sense for the long run? However, if we're not saving any money operationally, and we can always switch carts next time
Yeah.
at full price, I understand that. However, if we're going to stick with tennis next time around, then we get another pass until another contract. So I guess I feel like we're kind of debating a solution, screaming for a problem.
Brian Smith has a couple of comments that seem to make good sense. However, he does say something that leads me to understand that he has not read the contract at all. Because he mentions that, well, if we don't get our carts this time, we can always, the next time around, the next time we contract, we can get our carts. Or, if we're with tennis that time, well, then we get another pass. Except that this particular contract that is before the city council today, it says that any time from now to when it expires, that the city has the option to decide to buy carts and supply the carts at any time within the contract. So it isn't that they have to decide that right now this night. And it isn't that they have to decide that we're not doing it now, but we're going to wait till the next contract. This contract today says that they can do that and supply the carts and buy the carts anytime in the 5.5 years of the contract. It's not a decision that needs to be made today or in 5.5 years. They could make it any time. And that's why I know that Brian Smith did not read that contract. And apparently, William Knutson didn't read the contract.
So, Mr. Beatty, would that be accurate, that we could still approve the contract but not decide the cart issue tonight?
Madam Mayor, Council, that's correct.
Okay. Councilmember Juenemann.
Thank you. Could we also ask if Ms. Finwall has pricing, so we could compare what this would be with Mr. Tennis's cart company? We should also have the pricing from the other company if we're going to be going into depth on this.
I think that certainly would be appropriate if the council, as a group, we decide that we're not going to address the cart issue tonight, that we would get additional information from Ms. Paulseth and additional information about other alternatives for purchasing carts. Okay?
And so all of this discussion that's going on and on and on about these carts would have all been alleviated if somebody would have early on just said, hey, I read the contract, and we can get the carts next month, 10 months from now. Let's just move on.
It's as if whatever happened at these secret meetings, one wonders, did they actually have meetings, or did Kathleen Juenemann just meet with a couple of staff members? It seems perplexing that there should be so much on her favorite issue, the issue she claims she's been working on for 20 or 25 years. She didn't take any time to educate them on what the contract said.
And you see, they're putting as much time into all this discussion about these carts as they would put into whether or not they're going to be building the Wakefield Pavilion, something that's a capital improvement that's going to last for years and years and years and years. Garbage carts don't last 50 years.
Maybe 35 years.
You know what? Let's listen to our next clip and see what the appointed mayor says.
Just one second. in trying to understand this, the carts have a shelf life of about 10 years. And it seems to me that this is a cash outlay, a large cash outlay, that are we trying to chase a grant, but we have to come up with $234,000 ourselves, and our residents are going to be charged more.
Right.
And it's not matching up for me that this is a true benefit.
So we have it on the word of appointed Mayor Marley Abrams. These carts have a life of 10 years. So we're putting all this time and effort into something that only lasts 10 years. Why should the city be in the cart business? Now, we have to end our news program here, but we'll continue next week. But Mr. Berglund, once the council finally does get to this issue of if they're buying carts or not buying carts, I'm going to wager a bet that appointed Mayor Marley Abrams, even though she says she's not convinced that the city should own carts, I think she's going to vote for the carts and that the city own them. Are you taking any bets?
I would not be shocked if she did that because she has a history of being false and being a flip-flopper. She does not believe in transparency. And one thing I can add to this whole discussion, again, there's no community engagement, there's no city conversation, there's no public comments from a few individuals. Just like their appointment process, it's an all inside game with a few people telling the city residents what they should have with very little knowledge of what the city residents have an interest in or what they want. You can see that Brian Smith seems like he's mentally outside of the city now because for whatever reason. William Knutson seems not to be grounded. Mary Abrams seems to be remote from public comment. And
there is not one comment from the other appointed council member, Sylvia Neblett.
Completely absent.
Absent.
Completely no discussion. Completely no comment as if, well, Kathy Juenemann, I can see you got Knutson's goat, you got Mary Abrams' goat, you got Brian Smith's goat, you're not going to get my goat.
Well, thank you very much, viewers, for tuning in this week. And Mr. Berglund, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
Council, any other suggestions in terms of additional information that we need? Okay.
So can I just
City
to be
manager
clear,
comment.
after we assemble the answers to these questions, we will bring it back to a next agenda whenever that is.
That
Clear?
would be my
Okay.
understanding and expectation based on what Mr. Thompson just said. We don't ultimately have to make a decision to purchase carts or, we can look at the information and say, we're just not interested,
Okay.
and then move on from there. But we need some more clarity on this as to what is the benefit.
So Mayor, I'd move to authorize the execution of the attached contract between the City of Maplewood and Tennis Sanitation for curbside residential recycling.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Smith, seconded by Knutson, the motion to authorize the execution of the attached contract between the City of Maplewood and Tennis Sanitation for curbside residential recycling. Any further discussion? Any further discussion by the council?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.